I'm going to get into some topic that is very interesting, and I'm sure you're going to find it interesting. I'll just tell you briefly the number of subjects I'm going to cover tonight. I'm going to talk about treaties, especially your treaty, and the relationship that the Mi'kmaq had with other nations, and then I want to get into what this means, what your treaty really means. There's a lot of to it that the people themselves don't understand. And your first involvement was the 1725 treaty, and then you had the 1752 and the 1761. Probably the really important one was the 1752. It was important because at the same time in history, three states had bounties on you, same as us. Chippewa were down in the Detroit area. We were down there most of the time, and from 1750 on, under Chief Pontiac down there, which was our relative, and incidentally, you are our relative as well. I had laughed. I brought my daughter's mother, who spoke her first language was Ojibwe, and she came here and she started listening to Mi'kmaq, and she said, I can pick up that language in about 3 days. It's very similar to ours. So we are brothers from way back. Well, anyway, the important thing at that time was that they were the settlers were without I guess without any good reason or without any authority from us, we're still pushing into all of our land, and we decided that we were going to fight against the British. So Ojibwe under we had a confederacy called Three Fires Confederacy, which was actually bigger than the Iroquois, and so we went after them. We captured 9 of 11 forts, and we killed them all in those 9 forts. We let 2 of them go because they were actually friendly towards us. But at the same time, you were just starting. They were extremely afraid of the Mi'kmaq, and the reason you got your treaties was they were afraid you were going to wipe them out. So they had to make this peace with you. So the meaning of the peace is not, I would never let them try to create their own narrative on what it was. But it was really there because they were afraid if you were going to wipe out all I call the white people colonial Caucasoids. So, and that's what they are today. And actually up until 1983, and then Canada was just a colony, and they had no right to do all those things they'd done, especially not the Indian Act. They were, a crazy colony, except their numbers outnumbered us, and we just didn't know their European legal system. A place where there were just endless wars whatsoever. So that's why they were all coming over here. So your real basis for your treaty is that they were just deathly afraid of you. So that's how you got your treaty. There's a lot of things in the treaty that don't appear in others. For instance, you've got your truck houses. And that also means that you got free trade from any place which was Mi'kmaq country, and then that's that's the way you got to think of yourself. All of this area is Mi'kmaq country, and they've never paid you a cent for any of it, so it's really yours, and you've always got to hold on to this. But probably the very important thing that you've got all of course, the fishing rights, and I really disagree with a lot of the court cases on that describe our rights, because it's all wrong. When we, I'm just going to back and go to the Royal Proclamation. The Royal Proclamation was really put in place because of our attacks against the British, but it was also the cause of the American Revolution, because that would have stopped the westward expansion. So the Royal Proclamation, perhaps its most important, one of its most important things, is that it didn't create any of your rights. The Caucasians, or the Caucasoids can't create the rights for you over here. You already had them. They were already all in place. And the Royal Proclamation just recognized them. That's all it did. It recognized them. And same as Section 35 and 25. It doesn't create any. Nobody can come and create your rights for you. You always had them for thousands of years. And it may be in different forms that we couldn't describe in their kind of language or anything, nor should it be. But we had law and order much better than perhaps they, as peasants and serfs over in Europe, had. So these proclamations. Oh, there's another one too. Another important one that somebody out there would be probably interested in looking up. It's called the Rowan Proclamation.
What's it called?
Now, one thing about the treaties that is new to a lot of you is they're of course they don't all have the same words, but some of the things that they do have is they have references to your Aboriginal treaty rights, and you have one of the greatest ones here. You can't get around it, and they can't interpret that for you. So some of the courts, I notice what they're doing. They're trying to give you their interpretation of rights, which is totally wrong. But in any event, the true meaning of those rights were or should have been held at least by our elders, your original makers of the treaties. Which comes to this brings up a very important point, in that when John A. Macdonald set up these chiefs and councils, and they are a setup of John A. Macdonald. He created the Indian Act as well, and in doing so, he confined that chief and council just to those whatever he left in the Indian Act for them, which was in fact was nothing. So he left them with no authority, and well, it just means that he didn't trust them any more than he trusted the elders, which were really in charge. And actually, through all of the people, you actually still hold the power of your nation. Not chief and council, they've got too big a conflict of interest. Their control is under the minister. Minister controls any decision they make. So that's the problem they have. So they can't act under Aboriginal and treaty rights, because they're a corporation as well, and not an Indian. And so, but they do have a fiduciary responsibility, a trust responsibility, and essentially that's all they have. They pass on paperwork to their bosses, which is Indian Affairs for you, and that's where the decisions are made. So your treaties also contain, I'm just going to tell you a few more things. Under the Rowan Proclamation, it also says you're tax-free, you're totally tax-free. Because at the time, the British were actually implementing the Royal Proclamation, and so Indians had to introduce a law called Indian Protection Act. Now, you've got to look at this in the kind of context it was in that day, and that the Protection Act you could never compare that to the Indian Act. In fact, it was protecting Indians who lived all over the place from settlers coming in and taking their lands away, or trying to tax them, and so it was put in place. So essentially, you're still tax-free because that's a royal proclamation, and you can't cancel those. But it also mentioned that they couldn't sue you. So just where the Indian Act grabbed a few things out of it and made it much weaker than it really is. But I think if you go back to the Rowan Proclamation and use it as it's stated in there, you're going to get a much different interpretation of some of those rights. And it also contains rights on family, on how you adopt, how you husband and wife relationships. So it was important in recognizing these things. Just as you have those important things of truck houses to use the terms that they use, but in today's terms, we'd be using our own interpretation of that. We would never let them tell us what those things mean. We would bring our own modern day interpretation to that. Okay, so those are just some of the things that are Aboriginal treaty rights that exist in other treaties. And for instance, in the Robinson Hearn, you'll have rights to resources, where it says as they make a profit, everything will be adjusted, would be moved upwards liberally and justly. And, those are the words they use in that. But you have that as well, and there's other things, but perhaps the most important thing is the treaty recognizes your nationhood. You are a nation, and that's why you can't be a Canadian. And because let me just talk about the BNA Act for a bit. The BNA Act was passed as part of Britain's obligations at the time for her colony of Canada. So the BNA Act was passed on to Canada, which was a colony, okay? And which probably means that they had absolutely no right to introduce the Indian Act, which they did. And of course, the Indian Act was primarily designed to so that they could get hold of your lands and resources, and then they've used it quite effectively and as racially as I guess any colony in the world would. But which leaves us in the kind of the situation we're in today. Our people are really suffering, and I may not necessarily mean just here, but you go to a lot of those northern communities and all the provinces, and the people have no chance at anything. They're very bleak future, and this should never be like this. And this is racism, at its worst. And this is why I come back to fight. So I'm going to make sure, I'm going to stay on this until we get rid of all the racism out of not only the Indian Act, but all government legislation. And they begin to treat us as nations here. Your greatest gift that you have is your nationhood. And don't ever let anybody change that. I'm insulted when he calls me a Canadian. I'm not a John A. Macdonald Canadian, whose existence come because somebody signed a little piece of corporate paper. Our nationhood comes from people for thousands of years. That's why it's so important. And I think we're going to try a few things in court on the nationhood. I'll be going to court for in a short time, and I'm going to try a lot of things. I can get away with a lot that lawyers can't. So, and I'm going after them. But anyway, I don't want to take up too much time, but I thought those are really important points for you to know, and at some point, you know, I hope a lot of chiefs and councils will come and listen, because I find a lot of them are scared of me. There's no reason. All I'm doing is telling them the truth, pointing out that hey, at some point, just listen. I'm not going to try to change your mind, but listen to the truth, and I'm sure you'll change your mind then. But anyway, you've got wow, you've got just a huge battle, but everything's on your side. You own them. Mi'kmaq country here, which covers 3 provinces. I believe it covers 4, okay, and 5. And we don't seem to be having too much hope with our political organizations. So I think the people have to get behind something themselves and bring it out. And that's what's happening here. Yeah. You've got a rights association that's standing up for you. And where's the organizations? You don't see them around. Okay, I'm just going to leave it at that. But you've got several other issues that you want to discuss. I'm not going to go into any of the details on that. I'll leave it up to. There are other people here that can probably do a little better job than me. But in any event, I'm just hoping that you'll keep moving ahead with your rights, and someday you'll get a resolution to all the land that you own. Thank you. The book is finally out. It's been a grueling process for me, but now you can order it at the bottom of this presentation. Order it quickly, because they will be gone.